Supervillains, people that are by definition bad people, people that cause harm, destruction, chaos everywhere they go. But for some reason, thanks to psychology, we find ourselves resonating and siding with these chaotic, sinister people. And the best way to describe this crazy phenomenon is to break down the deep-rooted psychology behind these supervillains and why it appeals to us. The first psychological reason that we love supervillains is ego. Compared to the rest of the psychological things we'll talk about, this one is probably the least complex trick. But basically, to break it down, if you guys haven't noticed, 90% of villains are driven by ego. And the best way I can back up this claim is by looking at a beautiful example in The Flash. Here we can take a look at this scene where we see Eobard Thawne explaining why he actually hates the Flash.
You're dazzling, and then you save the crowd. A crowd that I was meant to save. A crowd that was meant to thank me. You saw my greatest moment was in that moment that I knew I had to get faster than you.
This mindset right here of always wanting to be the best, having the best image, having people cheer after you constantly is what drives these supervillains. But to build on top of that, the reason this ego appeals to us is because we all can relate to this feeling. We've all had personal experiences where we can relate to feeling powerless, worthless, so when we see these villains in a similar situation, all we can do is feel a little sorry for them. Guys, as this video goes on, you'll see time and time again that our brain does its best to try to side and resonate with other people. No matter how evil, how cruel they look, we always try our best to see the good in them. And this is what's known in psychology as the good man placebo effect. Like in our example, you could make the argument that it was Flash's fault that he made Reverse Flash so angry and feel worthless, and that's why he retaliated. Do you get where I'm going with this? Okay. And moving on, the next psychological trick we have to talk about is purpose. Guys, I truly think many evil villains we see today, whether it's the Lizard in Spider-Man, or it's Slade Wilson from Green Arrow, or it's the Thinker from The Flash, all of these evil villains have one thing in common. Initially, they tried to do things for the good. So they had a good purpose and intention when they first started, but that purpose was later twisted through whatever circumstances occurred. Now this is a very important note because psychologically it shows the viewers the actual intent, the actual good, positive intent these villains had. It sort of lets us know that, okay, hey, you know, these villains were actually good at one point, and you guys will notice next time you're watching an evil villain movie and you guys see the movie go on and on, deep down you'll kind of start hoping that maybe in the future they return to their old habits. We'll always have that little glimmer of hope as the movie goes on. Us as humans will always try to find ourselves to the good side of these people. Whether it existed 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we always will try to find that little glimmer of hope. Guys, let's look at a really beautiful example. Let's look at Amazing Spider-Man 2. Or one of them. The one with like the green lizard looking kid, this loser kid right here, this guy. Okay, great. At first, all he was trying to do as Dr. Connor, his original form, was make scientific breakthroughs. He wanted to be able to self-replicate so people that had medical conditions or amputated patients would have a way of getting their lost body parts back. Do you guys see how great of an initial purpose he had? He literally wanted to reinvent the entire genetic DNA markers within our bodies. It is so, oh my god. I don't know if you guys understand me, babes. Look at me, really look at me. That is such a crazy, beautiful purpose. Oh my god, Lizard Man, I love you, babes. I love you. But now, if you take that beautiful purpose and you take it a little too far and he turns evil, blah blah blah, we think to ourselves, I mean, you can't be too mad at him. He was trying to make a positive change. He was a good guy, to be honest. He's a good guy. He got a little bit carried away. This was an accident. Oh, like you can't really blame him. Oh. And that's exactly how subconsciously they still somehow become a positive person in our brains. Like, isn't it crazy what our brains will trick us to do? We somehow psychologically like tricked ourselves into believing this lizard green ugly scientist man is a good guy. How? So far we talked about psychological things about these villains that have happened in the future. Like for example, their purposes, their intentions changing in the future, blah blah blah. But now let's go to the past. Let's dive into another core reason behind why we subconsciously fall in love with these villains. Their past. More specifically, the negative trauma and bad things they've had to deal with in their past. Like take for example in The Flash, when Reverse Flash and Flash were fighting it out in a big brawl and Reverse Flash was actually stuck in the past for 15 whole years. That right there is a past consequence we can clearly see and identify about this villain. That 15 whole years of lost time because of a time travel gone wrong is already a past consequence we can recognize. And if you stack up enough of that bad trauma for a villain, eventually we'll fall in love because there's so many little things we can resonate with. Oh, you were stuck in the past for 15 whole years, you wasted 15 years of your life? I could see why you want to kill this man. And from the same show, we can look at yet another beautiful example, Savitar. This was one of the most powerful villains in the entire show, and yet many millions and millions of fans fell in love with this villain. And who would have guessed, the reason being his past. Savitar was essentially a version of Barry Allen who became evil, but only because in the past his own family, his own team had abandoned him and told him he was a phony.
Let's go. You all shunned me because I wasn't the true Barry Allen. I was an aberration.
He was left alone at such a young, early age, and that's why he is the way he is now. And the show further adds on to that by giving him a scar on his face, a physical attribute that we can look at and actually feel sympathy that way. If you catch these two in any scene together, you can look at Flash, who's supposed to be like the hero, but he has clear skin, beautiful, nice face, and you look at Savitar, an abandoned version with a deadly, evil, traumatizing scar on his face. Obviously, a very, very calculated move to make us psychologically resonate with the villain. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? This is so high IQ, bro, listen to me. But now, ladies and gentlemen, the last point we have to talk about is charisma. This point is truly a beautiful one to end it off with because it lets us think past our subconscious mind and lets us look through our eyes. Guys, as you all know, our eyes are very, very deceiving. So it's no surprise that evil villains and overall real-life serial killers are often described as very, very charismatic and charming. This is tactically done, so we are literally forced to like these evil villains. We literally can't help it. Our brains cannot help it. When an attractive evil villain is slowly whispering while the camera slowly zooms in on them with some dramatic lightning, we are subconsciously forced to pay attention. Guys, how about this? Take any of your personal favorite villain. I don't know who it is. Just think of whatever villain you love. Think of him. And now take away 50% of their looks. Take half of their beautiful looks away, so they're ugly as hell now, and take away the ability for them to talk like this in a nice, evil, whispery, smooth way. So now that your favorite villain is super ugly and doesn't know how to speak charismatically, tell me, is he still your favorite villain? And we can also kind of further add on to this point if we look at the real world implications of this. It's a very common thing to say in the real world, you know, girls are into the bad guys, bad boys are heartbreakers, everyone loves the bad boys, and typically the reason for this is because one, they're charismatic, but secondly, it's untypical. It's not typical. It's a very unconventional thing to do. If I'm told I'm not supposed to want this thing, it's a bad person, it's a bad guy, I subconsciously want it more. So whenever I see an evil character or someone that's portrayed to be a bad person, subconsciously, literally just because they're bad, I want to side with them. It kind of makes me like feel rebellious. It's like, okay, like I'm not supposed to be liking you, but I like you, you know, like I don't know how to explain it. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks to these 4 beautiful reasons we discussed today, we have truly broken down the psychology of super villains.